All right, guys, so today we're going to talk about drawing. I'm just going to give a brief introduction here. So, drawing is kind of the basis of all visual art in a way. So, let's get into it. So, what is a drawing? So, in a sort of simplest terms, drawing is to pull, push, or drag any sort of mark making tool across a surface, which then leaves a line or mark. Drawings can be preparatory sketches, they can also be finished artwork. Um, The oldest representational drawing ever found is a cave painting in Lenang Tongdong Cave in Indonesia, the island of Sulawesi. So this pig is dated to 51,200 years ago. It's a bit of an estimate, but they think it's pretty close. And we actually don't know if this was made by modern humans or another species or subspecies of earlier humans, but essentially, what I'm trying to get at here is that drawing is extremely ancient and may sort of predate humanity itself. So, our first sort of category of drawing is known as dry media. So, dry media is anything such as like a pencil, charcoal, chalk, pastels, crayon. So, essentially, any drawing tool that can be used without a solvent such as water counts as dry media. And the advantages of dry media are they kind of allow for a range of value, a range of line quality, a range of different textures you can create in any given drawing. So most forms of dry media are erasable and highly portable, which makes it a go-to choice for preparatory sketching, outdoor sketching, drawing on location. And on the right here, we've got some studies by Michelangelo. So you'll see he's using red chalk, small accents of white chalk here, just on some parchment paper. But you'll see he's able to get a pretty big range of value here just with a couple tools. And so our kind of companion to dry media is known as liquid media. So liquid media uses materials suspended in liquid, such as ink, which are then applied with a pen or a brush. So liquid media such as pen and ink can be used to create highly controlled and detailed line work, but you can also use liquid media such as things like watercolor or India ink to use sort of more brush-based drawing techniques, which can make sort of more expressive and flowing marks. So we've got a Rembrandt drawing over here. He's using pen and brown ink, brown and gray wash, some lines in red and black chalk. So he's using a variety of different materials here, some dry, but mostly liquid media. And you'll see he's able to create these really expressive marks. So a lot of our lines here are very sort of smooth and flowing. You can almost feel the texture of this page here that it is, liquid has been applied to it. And it can sort of allow for a greater range in value. If we go back to our Michelangelo work here, we'll see the image looks rather dry. It looks like, that there's not liquid staining the page, except maybe in that bottom right corner there. And still allows for a range of value, but not quite as much. We're not getting those grays and those super stark whites and blacks like we do here in our Rembrandt. So advantages to both. Liquid media can be more difficult to control than dry media, but can also lead to more expressive mark making. So what are the functions of drawing? So we have two sort of main categories here. Receptive drawing, so this is something that exists in real life, such as a still life or a location drawing. Both of our previous examples we've looked at so far are both receptive drawings. And then on the other hand, we have projective drawing. So projective drawing is something that exists only in the mind of the artist. So it's more utilized by artists who draw from imagination, but it's also used by designers, such as, architects. If you're designing a building, you're creating a projective drawing. Now, the two are very much interlinked, and many artists work in a sort of hybrid style of using some receptive elements, so drawing from models that do exist in real life, but then superimposing them into perhaps backgrounds that are more projective. So just to show an example of our receptive versus projective drawing styles here, we have Mary Cassatt. She's an American artist from the 1800s in the omnibus. So this is, I believe they're getting on a train here, and she just sketched this on location. So it's black chalk and graphite on paper. And Mary Cassatt was a realist, so this is a sort of realistic image of what this family looks like being on the train. And then on the right, we have a sort of very different work, a projective drawing. So this is Martin Ramirez. He was a Mexican-American artist, and this is a untitled work of his, sort of dubbed Horse and Rider in Auburn, California. So he's using crayon, pencil on paper here. And Ramirez was unfortunately plagued by mental illness. He lived in a mental institution for a large portion of his life, and that's where he made most of his work. Um, but you'll see his scene here is extremely imaginative, not based in reality. We have this very stylized cowboy character on a horse, um, flanked by this sort of interesting architectural design. So receptive, projective, or drawing from life versus drawing from imagination. So next I want to get into drawing as a way to plan a larger image, which is a common use of drawing by artists. So we have Pablo Picasso's first compositional study for Guernica, done in 1937. So you can see it's difficult to tell really anything about this sketch. If you're familiar with Guernica, you might be able to pick out we've got what appears to be a bull over here. We've got maybe some characters here, but he's working extremely loosely. And it's important to recognize this is a sketch that was really just for him. I doubt Picasso ever thought that people would be going over his sketches in such detail and really looking at them, taking them apart. Um, but you'll see in his next sketch, he's bumped it up quite a bit. So uh, it's just to show you can start with something quite small, quite minimal, and then really build off of it. But it's interesting to see Picasso's work style here of starting to fill in Guernica with these different characters. So if you're not familiar with the artwork of Guernica, it depicts a bombing of a Spanish town during World War II. So it was bombed by the Nazis, and all of the men were out fighting in the Spanish Civil War at the time. So it was mostly women and children in the town, and the entire town was destroyed. So Picasso was commissioned by the Republican government of Spain at the time to create an artwork for them. And Guernica, the bombing of Guernica happened sort of right after he received the commission. And so that's why he went about creating the work. And it's now known as one of the most famous sort of anti-war artworks in the world. But it's just interesting to see Picasso's process here, how he goes from such a small sketch to what ends up being a absolutely massive painting. It's interesting to see all three of these works sort of besides each other. We've got our initial sketch, which is extremely minimal, difficult for us to even tell. I'm sure Picasso knew what he was putting where, and then how he goes about reworking the composition a bit in his second sketch. You'll see he's added some characters, um, added some more detail here, starting to fill in where these people go. And Picasso is working in a very sort of shape-based language here. So he's thinking about just from a 2D design perspective, what shapes should go where to kind of guide the viewer's eye around the image, what he wants to emphasize. And then in the final painting here, we see it finally sort of fully realized. And I just think it's interesting to see his process here. Sort of gets you thinking about sketching as an act of, um, art making, but also as an act of planning a design. And Picasso did meticulously plan this design before creating his final work. Um, and so here's Guernica for human, just to give you a sort of human scale. But yeah, this is a massive, massive painting that started with a very small sketch. So that's my introduction to drawing and sketching.